Tiramisu cookies. This one was highly requested, and honestly, I resisted making these cookies for a long time. And that's because a tiramisu cookie is going to need to be made with mascarpone frosting. It's going to need to be refrigerated, and refrigerated cookies can kind of be a pain because they need to still be good even when they're cold. But we finally nailed it. It took a lot of attempts. This recipe is going to make about 15 cookies. They're larger, more gourmet style cookies, so I felt like that was a good number, but I don't see any reason why this recipe wouldn't double well if you wanted to make more. All right, let's start with a large mixing bowl. To this, we're going to add a half cup or 113 grams of softened unsalted butter. We'll also add a half cup or 100 grams of granulated sugar, and then just a fourth cup or 50 grams of firmly packed light brown sugar. The light brown sugar really adds like a nice subtle depth without making the cookie too rich on its own. If you've made my classic tiramisu, you know that the cookie layer itself is not super flavorful. It's flavored a lot with coffee, so I didn't want to go overboard with sweetening the cookie. I didn't want like a sugar cookie base. All right, let's go ahead and use an electric mixer. You can use a stand mixer with a paddle attachment if you prefer. Today I'm just using a hand mixer. We'll beat this until it's light and creamy. All right, once this is light and creamy, let's take a look. Make sure you can get a good look at that. We are going to add our next ingredient. I'm just gonna slide this out of the way because the next ingredient is an egg. One large egg, room temperature is nice. Helps things combine nicely. And then, kind of a twist from what we do with a lot of our cookies, we're also going to add one large egg white. So we're not going to use the yolk. You know, you can save it for something else or discard it. Now, this extra egg white was intentional. I wanted these cookies to be a little bit lighter and cakier for a couple reasons. I wanted them to kind of be distantly related to ladyfingers, which use a lot of egg whites, and having a lighter texture keeps it softer in the refrigerator. So this was very intentional. Don't just throw in the egg yolk because you don't want to get rid of it. Let's go ahead and mix these in. And when I'm doing this, I gradually increase my speed to high, and I'll mix on high for a bit because I want things really well incorporated. I want the batter to be nice and uniform. Oh, and I almost forgot, the vanilla extract, we'll add this as well. Not too much vanilla. Again, I didn't want the cookie itself to be too rich. A fourth teaspoon. I usually add it with eggs, but it's okay to stir it in after. Just enough vanilla. The main flavor of the cookies will be espresso. We'll get to that in a bit. Okay, these are really nicely combined. Slide it out of the way. Grab a separate bowl for your dry ingredients. We're going to add 1 3/4 cup or 220 grams of all-purpose flour. We're also going to add 3 tablespoons of cornstarch. Cornstarch really, again, helps lend itself to that slightly cakey but still tender texture of the cookie. A teaspoon of baking powder and 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda and 1/2 teaspoon of table salt. Go ahead and whisk everything together, get this nicely combined. Just a reminder, the full recipe with weights is always listed in the description of the recipe, and I always include a link to the printable recipe on my website. If you are watching this from the membership, you get early access, so you're usually seeing this before that printable link is working because you are seeing the recipe before even the followers on my website are. Soon that'll be available for you too. Let's bring back our wet ingredients, and we're going to gradually add the dry to the wet, stir on low speed until combined. Don't need to go crazy anymore. Usually just add it in 2 or 3 parts. It's really not that much flour. Add a bit more, and our last bit. And always scrape your bowl, make sure everything's well incorporated. Okay, next up, we talked a little bit about espresso powder. Let's talk about that a bit more. Espresso is a key flavor in tiramisu, so of course we needed to incorporate it in our cookies. To get a really nice, strong flavor, or very present flavor, we are going to bloom the espresso powder first rather than just mix it in with our dry ingredients. So I have a tablespoon of very hot water here and a tablespoon of espresso powder. Drizzle that in. We'll leave it on the edge with this tiny dish, but we'll make it work. And then just whisk it together. The hotter your water, the better, because it's going to do a better job of blooming the espresso and getting a really deep flavor. Let's bring this back, and we will use our mixer again to stir in the espresso. I kind of like to start stirring on low speed and drizzle it in. Ooh, a little messy. That's okay. I kind of say low speed, and then I like turn it up to high. Patience. That last bit in. And this bit of liquid being added also helps add a little bit of lightness to the cookie. Again, that's not something I aim for in a lot of my cookies. I'm looking for dense and chewy usually, but this cookie called for lighter and cakier. And I will say it works really well. So this dough is going to need to chill, especially since we just put that hot water in it. It's going to be a little bit too sticky to manage. I like to chill it for at least 30 minutes, an hour's even better. Of course, you can even chill it longer than that. I'm going to cover it with plastic wrap. We'll place it in the fridge. Now, a bit before you're ready to begin baking and your dough's done chilling, you'll want to get your oven preheating to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. All right, this dough has actually chilled a little bit longer than an hour, so it's probably going to be a little less sticky than yours will be at 30 minutes. We're going to go ahead and scoop about 2 tablespoon sized portions. This is like 35 grams. Now I have to measure it to make sure it's actually 35 grams because I have a problem with not always making my cookies uniform. We're going to want to roll the dough into a smooth ball. It's a lot easier to do if the dough's a little bit colder. Place it on your baking sheet. Make sure you space your cookies at least 2 inches apart. Too many cookies on a baking sheet will make a mess. We're going to lightly flatten the cookies. If the dough's sticking to your hands too much, just lightly dampen your fingers with a little bit of water and the dough won't stick. All right, let's do a couple of these. I usually do 6 cookies to a sheet, and I always line the baking sheet with parchment paper. The dough will be a little bit stickier if you pull yours out after 30 minutes, but it should still be manageable. It's not, just chill it a tad longer. All right, let's go ahead and flatten these guys. Your oven should be preheated to 350 degrees Fahrenheit by this point. We're going to take these over to the center rack of our preheated oven. They're going to bake for 9 to 10 minutes. So if you're familiar with classic tiramisu, you will have these lady fingers and you dip them in an espresso liquid mixture before you assemble the tiramisu. I wanted to replicate that and also infuse even more flavor and moisture into the cookies. We're going to make a simple, it's not a syrup. We're going to make a very simple espresso mixture to brush over the cookies. So I usually prepare this while they're baking. So you'll need just a half tablespoon of espresso powder. It's 1.5 teaspoons and 2 tablespoons of hot water. And I go ahead and mix that in, do it nice and smooth. And then you'll also need a teaspoon of either Kahlua, which is what I'm using today and what I prefer, or you can use a spiced rum. I think a Marsala wine would also work well here. We just use a teaspoon of this. And if you want to go without the alcohol, you can, but you will lose some of that classic tiramisu flavor and some of that depth. It'll just be a little bit less flavorful. I might recommend using a splash of vanilla instead. All right, now when they're finished baking, the edges should be set. They might be beginning to turn a very light golden, but you do not want to overdo it with these cookies. Err on them being slightly underdone rather than overdone. If they're overdone, they end up dry and it's tragic, guys. Now, if your cookie's kind of domed on the top, maybe you didn't flatten them enough, you can use the Yep, okay, it's clean. Clean bottom of a measuring cup to just very gently flatten the top. That way you have a smooth surface for putting our frosting on top, but that wasn't really necessary with these, but I wanted to demonstrate. Now I let these cool for about 5 minutes. I want them to be still warm when I brush them, but I don't like them to be too hot because sometimes they're a little fragile when they're hot. So after a few minutes, I'll take a pastry brush. We'll go ahead and dip it, and then I kind of tap off the excess. I don't want to make the cookies soggy, so it's a light brushing. Just gonna press it against the side to drip off any extra, and we'll lightly paint the top of each cookie one way, and then we'll go the other way and paint it again. You will not use all of this mixture. Tap off the extra, brush it, brush again. Again, do not go overboard on this or the cookies will be soggy. All right, now the cookies will need to cool completely before you can put the frosting on. If you try to add that while they're hot, the frosting will melt, it'll be messy, you'll be sad. So we're going to set these aside, and while they're cooling, we can prepare that frosting. What I love about this icing or frosting is that it actually is very easy. Mascarpone can be a little bit fussy to deal with, not in today's recipe, and this is way easier than making like a zabaglione for tiramisu. So we need a half cup or 120 milliliters of cold, heavy cream. Go ahead and pour that into a mixing bowl. Add 4 ounces of mascarpone cheese straight from the fridge, nice and cold as well. Everything, or the cream and the mascarpone are cold. Just go right in together. 3/4 cup or 95 grams of powdered sugar, 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla extract. This is my teaspoon, we'll just go halfway. 2 teaspoons of Kahlua or rum, whichever one you choose to use. Spiced rum is what you would use. You will need an electric mixer for this step. Grab it. We are going to start mixing on low speed. Once the mascarpone seems like it's mostly incorporated, increase your, mostly broken up, increase your speed to high. And we are just going to continue to mix on high speed until we have stiff peaks. This is looking pretty good. I'd call that stiff peaks, wouldn't you? So this is going to go into my piping bag. You can just spread the topping on top. You can pipe it on top, do whatever you want, but I like to use a 1/2 inch. I think this is a 1/2 inch tip. Maybe I'm wrong on that. It's a 1A tip. Add our frosting right in here. I have my glass for my handy trick. Remember, we are only piping the frosting on completely cooled cookies. Bench scraper is great for just moving that down. All right, let's check on our cookies, make sure they're cooled completely. Keep this cold if they're not. Once they're nice and completely cool, we can go ahead and add our frosting. Go ahead and do a nice decorative little swirl. This This is kind of how I do my loft house cookies. Don't go too crazy on your frosting because this makes like exactly the right amount to cover 15 cookies. Then of course we need a dusting of cocoa powder. I recommend natural cocoa powder. I think that's best and most classic. Scoop up a bit of it here. Go ahead and dust that over the cookies. And of course you can enjoy these cookies right away, but if you don't eat them right away, you will need to keep them, oh, that was heavy, in the fridge in an airtight container. I am really excited for you to try this and let me know what you think. I really do always love hearing from you. If you enjoy this one, maybe you will also enjoy my classic tiramisu or my tiramisu cake recipe that I shared a bit ago. I'm gonna cut into one so you guys can see this texture. You can see they're nice and soft, a little different from cookies I often go for. I really like these. And I think you will too. Ah! This needs to go. We need new everything. Was he like in the butter or something? I am appalled. One of these days it's gonna break.